Okay, let's start. We are a small group today, that's fine. We will record this session so that everyone can rewatch it or share it with anyone who is interested. Hello and thank you for joining us. My name is Johanna and I'm a business psychologist at Thrive. In this session, we will talk about how to deal with redundancies and how to cope with significant life changes and emotional challenges. We will also talk about how to best support leaders and HR in the process. So today I'm delighted to be joined by our wonderful guest speaker, Danielle Bacon, today, who will share her expertise in this. Hi. Maybe you can mute yourself, that would be great, just until you want to say something. I'm delighted that Danielle is an experienced people and organizational change leader on a mission to support organizations to build more humanistic workplaces. She worked to create the conditions that enable leaders, individuals and teams to shape and implement the changes needed to achieve organizational success, while also helping people thrive and personally and professionally. And Danielle is a strong advocate of opening up conversations about mental health in the workplace and championing well-being as an integral enabler of both personal and organizational health and success. So Danielle was a director of people and business services at Investors and People for 5 years. And in her role, Danielle was part of a small executive team that led to transition of investors and people out of the public sector into the not-for-profit sector. Danielle worked in partnership with the CEO to create a brand new people and well-being strategy and successfully delivered series of transformational people project. Also, Danielle lives in East Midlands with her husband and a 12-year-old son, Matthew, who just returned to school, I heard, and was or is ambitious to become a famous YouTuber and part-time firefighter. So hi, Danielle. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello. Thank you. Lovely to be with you.
So today, in this session, we will first focus on aspects of how to manage these emotional changes as an individual, give you some practical advice for managing these feelings and preventing them from impacting your mental well-being, to allow you to focus positively on the road ahead. And we will follow with how to support someone else who, with going through this difficult time or through this process, and as well as with Danielle, as I mentioned before, who will talk more about how to best manage the process of redundancies from an organizational and human perspective. And in the end, we will have around like 10 minutes for any questions you have and you would like to ask in the chat functions. So as you might experience yourself or know from someone else or from others you have in your circle around you, redundancies can be very stressful and can mean a significant life change. So they can affect our self-confidence, they challenge the purpose we have or challenge our identity. And some of us might experience feelings of disbelief or of denial, anger, loss of confidence, or just sadness, and others may be relieved and feel excited to start something new. So we all react differently to this significant change, and it's completely normal to have feelings, for example, of worries or feeling sad and stressed as a result, especially if we didn't know about the being made redundant or if this comes as a surprise. So if you're going through redundancy and you might experience feelings of uncertainty, and that uncertainty kind of causes the feeling that, or usually you might know that feelings that when things stay the same, we feel comfortable knowing what to expect on a day-to-day basis. But if that changes, like even our sense who we are can go through some odd and potential uncomfortable alterations, and try not to judge yourself, and it's perfectly normal to be nervous about any change, and it's also normal to have difficulties managing this transition, and no matter how awkwardly or uncomfortable you might feel through that, it's important to be kind to yourself and to share your feelings with others. And yeah, sharing feelings and using your support network is a very relevant point here. While this might be a shock for you, try to embrace the experience and consider the transition as an opportunity to build this internal psychological and emotional and intellectual muscles. So kind of growing from a hardship or like growing from a difficult time might be a healthier perspective on having in this situation. And coming to that, there are a few things you might want to do for yourself. For example, you may want to reframe the situation, try to think like, what can you change and what is out of your control, for example, or could this redundancy actually help you to achieve new goals or help you to grow, as I mentioned before? And is there something you always wanted to change or do? And maybe you have not control over losing the job, but you can control how you deal with the loss and maybe move forward. So you may also want to reframe your position. So really try to avoid any thinking around I was made redundant, but rather think like my position was made redundant. And this will help you to kind of not focus on a personal critique, because often this is really not the case, and rather focus on like that this was like a business decision. And as I mentioned before, try to really stay connected and share your feelings. Family, friends, colleagues make old colleagues make a great support network, and it can sometimes feel hard to reach out for support, but speaking with your loved ones can be very, very crucial and help you to manage through this redundancy process. And it's also important to be honest and open, for example, with your partner or close support network as early as possible. And together then you can kind of tackle any financial or emotional worries you might have. And you don't have to face all this alone. You have these people around you. Remember that there's nothing to be ashamed of. If you want, like, this can happen to anyone and at any time. So it's just about like, yeah, reaching out, allowing yourself to use the support you have around you. And other tips might be to organize your time, making a list, for example, plans and daily calendars, and keeping a structure throughout the day, and you're keeping the schedule in your day as well. So, for example, creating a routine helps you to set those clear boundaries, which we really need. And this can be like sticking to a similar sleep schedule, getting up at the same time as you would usually do for work. It's just about having the structure in your day and without getting lost there. And you can also set yourself like small manageable goals which you can set for the day, and it's just a nice way of appreciating things if you achieve those goals for the day. And also try to be active. Like exercise won't make stress disappear, but it will help you to release the tension you might build up during the day. So this is something you might really want to consider. Another thing, when worries feel hard to control, one technique is to allocate yourself a worry budget. So where you can dedicate time to think about your worries. So dealing with worries in this way can help you to challenge, for example, hypothetical concerns, negative emotions, and put things into perspective, as well as to make you feel more comfortable and productive. And there on the slides you see a few points which help you to do that. So first is like creating a list of worries when they come up into your head. Then you allocate yourself no more than like 30 minutes per day at a specific time to work through the worry list. And maybe don't do that on a place where you usually relax. So I would avoid like places like the sleeping area, or for example, the sofa where you relax. When the time comes, work through your worry list and one by one sort things that you can do something about, but also things you want to deal later with, for example. And think about things you might solve some of the worries, make a plan how you can solve them, and maybe you can find a way to tackle them in this way. And for any hypothetical worries, like for example, what if I don't get another job? Ask yourself then, yeah, then what? Maybe it takes a time. I will I will apply for one job a day and reach out to my network. It's just having this reflective thinking here, which help you then to manage your worries. Following that, while often struggling to see redundancy as a good thing, it can present the opportunity to change and help you to take stock of your skills and talent and experiences. And maybe there's anything you want to change in your career. Have your goals remained the same, or is there a chance to start a new journey? And think about any options and identify where your passions are. If you maybe struggling to find that, or if you aren't sure what your passions are or what you want to do next, maybe you could speak to a friend or a family member or old colleague. Sometimes just speaking about it and reflecting with others helps to move forward and to just see other perspectives on that. Then you could start updating your CV and your professional social media accounts like LinkedIn. Just take time to consider the skills, tasks, and achievements from your last role and how you can take these forward to your new position or to a new position you would like to apply for. And your CV should outline, like, for example, goals, experiences, accomplishments, and also your personality, your interests, passions. You may also want to consider like clear social media presence, be proactive in groups, have an active and engage on websites and LinkedIn, social media, Facebook or Twitter. Just get yourself out there and try to be involved there, and also share your expertise and industry knowledge, and this can help you to connect with other people and start raising your profile then, and helps you maybe to be noticed in the future. Next one, if you're struggling with financial pressure, you might find free money advice. So the link is down here, very helpful. They have really good guidance and also offer further support. So this is maybe something you want to look up if you're struggling with that. If you're feeling lonely, if you're like isolated from others, there are various things you can do. So first might be that you realize that this is actually, it's more a feeling and not a fact. And you might want to consider like visiting places where you're around other people. This can be like a park or just maybe a cafe or a shopping mall. Also push yourself and reach out to friends and initiate meetings and telephone calls, even when your loneliness is maybe telling you, oh, I don't want to, or not today, maybe next week. Alternatively, there are really good online peer support groups. For example, on Mind, they have an online chat support group, or if you find, just connecting with people online who go through similar experiences can help there. And it helps you maybe to not feel alone. And other alternatives might be that you start volunteering or do something in your community. So just try to be creative and go out and connect with people, because this is really helpful, and this is helping you to build this resilience. If you're not yourself going through redundancy but know someone like close to you, or you're actually supporting someone, then you might want to consider the following things, which might help you to feel more empowered or feel more that you know how to best support this person. So listen how they're feeling. Having a chance to talk openly could help someone to feel calm and more able to move forward. And just being there for the other person is actually already a great thing. There's not much you can do wrong. It's more about like being there already. They're only things which you might want to consider and which might help you to feel more empowered by that. You can also ask like open questions, how do you feel, and actively listening. So this might help to facilitate or to help you to go through difficult conversations. Avoid telling them how they should feeling. So yeah, you shouldn't be stressed. You don't need to be upset about this, and this can kind of reinforce low self-esteem. So maybe try to avoid that, and reassure that stressful situations can pass and support them in the next steps. But try to avoid phrases like you never like the job anyway, or it happens to a lot of people. And even though those things might be true, the person might be not in the emotional position to process this right now in this way. You might rather try to help them to identify triggers of the stress, and yeah, don't be surprised if the person might react a bit angry. This anger might not just be directed towards the job loss. It could be about anything in this moment, because yeah, it's just a lot of tension, and it's coming through this transitional period. You may rather help them to practice, for example, relaxation techniques, and help them also to seek further support or additional professional help. And just make sure that the person know who to contact if they want to have a more support available. And so this could be Samaritans, for example. So this brings me actually now to Danielle, and who will talk a bit more about how to provide managers, leaders, and HR with advice, and how to best go through this process. So I will hand over now to Danielle.
Lovely, thank you, Anna. I think, yeah, like a lot of people, I've been involved with redundancy processes a number of times in my life. I mean, individually, I've been put at risk twice. I've been made redundant once. I've managed a redundancy process from an HR perspective. I've been involved as a manager. I've been part of a senior leadership team that had to initiate and lead a redundancy process, and I've watched colleagues and friends and family kind of go through it. So I think, as Joanna said, it can be devastating, although not always for individuals. Everybody reacts differently. But it's a really difficult process to navigate for everybody involved. But there are things that we as leaders and HR professionals and organisations can do to make the redundancy process better or more human. You can't always save jobs, you can't avoid that, but there are things you can do to make it kind of an easier process all round. So I mean, there's obviously formal and legal aspects of the redundancy process that an organisation has to go through. I think what's important as a leader and a manager is that every organisation has a choice about how they run the process, how they deliver news, and how they support people through it. I think for me, a thing as significant as a redundancy process is a kind of an organisational moment of truth. I think it really shows your employees and the world at large the type of employee you really are, and what your lived values are, how you treat people in that process is a real reflection of the sort of organisation you are. And I think how you treat people during the process, irrespective of the outcome, even if they lose their jobs at the end of it, has a huge impact on the people involved, the rest of the organisation, your managers, your HR team. So summing it up, I think it's finding ways to be as human as possible without getting caught in the trap of kind of a process mindset and a tick box series of meetings and things you have to do to get through the process. So I want to talk today a little bit about some of the ideas how you can do that, and really grateful to Thrive for inviting me to come along and kind of share my thoughts. So I think the first thing is around engagement with people. It's difficult in really large organisations, but the more personal you can make the engagement process and the redundancy discussions, the better. It gives people the opportunity to ask questions and really feel they're being heard. And I think it's also, particularly when a lot of people are still working from home, about being sensitive to individual situations. So if you're having a call or a Zoom call with somebody to put them at risk of redundancy, or tell them that their role isn't going to exist in the future, I think it's about trying to do that in a sensitive way. Think about timings. Are they going to be, if they're working from home, do they have a private space to have that conversation with you? I think the other really important thing for the people involved is to see accountability and ownership from the top of the organisation. So ideally, your chief exec should lead the process, or senior managers should really show that they're leading the process and explain the rationale really clearly. So transparency is super important to help people understand as much as possible about why the redundancy situations occurred, what's been done to date to try and avoid it. And the more transparent you can be, as I say, it helps people understand, and it helps build trust as well, people understanding that. So the other thing around kind of engagement is use of terminology. Joanna, you already talked about the kind of roles being made redundant and not people, and how important it is to get that message across. I mean, when you're in the position, even if you're told it's your role, not you, it can be quite difficult still, but I think that's important. And I think it's also, particularly from an HR perspective, a lot of the terminology in redundancy processes feels quite cold and legalistic. You know, we write letters saying you've been dismissed by reason of redundancy. They're quite harsh terms. So I think it's about making that effort to humanise the language wherever you can. And if you can't for whatever reason, you know, there might be a particular phrase you need to use to be legally compliant or to be really clear. I think you can still explain to people in advance that the terminology used might be the way it is, but just explain that why you've had to do that, and it's not necessarily the way you'd want to communicate it, but your hands are tied. So I think moving on to a bit more about communication, I think communication is absolutely key right from the get-go. The process is full of uncertainties. The redundancy process is full of uncertainties. You won't know the outcome. Individuals won't know. You know, in some cases there's quite a long consultation period where you're having conversations with people, and people will go have a kind of protracted period of time where they won't know whether their jobs are, you know, going to be safe or not, or whether they're going to face redundancy. So you can't give people certainty about that, but the more certainty you can give them about everything else, then it gives them some anchors to hold on to. So if you can give them clarity on timings, on the process, the sequence of activities, and some information about what happens if you do end up and they are in a situation where their role's made redundant, the more information you give them on notice periods, what their redundancy package will be, the more helpful that is, because it just reduces the kind of the breadth of uncertainty as much as you can. So I think the other thing is about considering the sequence of news. What can you do so that people find out in the right order, so they're not finding out from a colleague that their role's at risk of redundancy. The more personal you can make that, the better. So it might be you can have a big all team meeting where you kind of give headlines and then move into a series of one-to-ones to give people the news about their personal role on a more individual basis. I think the more clarity you can provide about what's happening, the better, and try not to assume that people will know the answers or assume anything. I think how people react and respond to a redundancy situation will depend a lot on the experiences that they've had of redundancy in other organisations. They will bring that with them to the process you're in, and it will colour their thinking and the questions they ask. So in a process I ran, one of the questions we had was, am I still going to, we announced the redundancy and I think payday was a couple of days later, and somebody wanted to know if they were going to be paid in 2 days' time. Well, to us that was obvious. You would carry on paying somebody until the redundancy process is concluded, but that individual was really concerned. So I think it's not making assumptions about anything, just answering questions. So I think the other thing to remember is about repeating messages and communication. Particularly when people are stressed or anxious, they won't necessarily take on board all the information you're giving them. So you need to find ways to repeat the information or provide it in multiple ways. So it might be a verbal update and then provide a kind of written briefing afterwards for people to refer to. I think try and use as many channels as you can to get to people. So that if they're not engaging in one way, they're hearing the information through another route. And what's worked really well for me in previous organisations is having a really clear channel for questions and answers, and committing to being really responsive to answering those. Again, it reduces the uncertainty for people, it builds trust, it helps show that you're being transparent about the process, and you can do things that set you up for success in that. If you put in a daily, at the start of the day, a daily catch up with the key decision makers, and you can address all the questions, get them answered, issue them out, and then you can turn the answers to the questions around really, really quickly. That's fine. So the next thing is about making consultation meaningful. So I think when you hear talking about redundancy processes, you often hear about consultation and making the consultation meaningful, and it's a legal requirement that if you're going through a redundancy consultation, you have to do that. But in some or a lot of organisations, it can become a bit of a tick box exercise where the organisation is seen to be consulting, but they're not really. So running a really human redundancy process, I think, is about giving people a voice in the process, not starting it thinking you've got it all mapped out and you know exactly what the outcome is going to be. At the beginning, it's about keeping an open mind. So, you might find that your employees, your team, have got much better answers to some of the questions and solutions than you've thought of. So leaders won't necessarily have all the answers. So the more they can create a redundancy process that really gives their teams the opportunity to feed in and come up with suggestions about how to avoid redundancies, and then the better, it might be things like offering unpaid sabbaticals, or the workforce might be willing to look at a 4-day week, or pay cuts for voluntary redundancies. Or there may be other creative things that you haven't even thought of that allow you to avoid a redundancy situation. So it might not change the outcome, but it might do. And if it does, that's better for the people involved, it's better for the organisation. And if it's done authentically, then it makes people feel valued. It shows that even though you're in this situation, you still care about care about their thoughts and their input. Your ability to do that as an organisation will depend to a great extent on the culture you've had before the redundancy process. So if there's not a lot of trust between kind of teams and leaders, then it's going to be harder to pull off. But if you've got a good kind of working relationship with good relationships between teams and leaders, then you've got more of a chance of making the consultation meaningful. Lovely. So the next thing I want to talk about is helping people leave well and feel valued. So unfortunately, when you go through a redundancy consultation process, a lot of the time there are individuals who do end up having their roles being made redundant. So as you said, it can be devastating, but it can also be pivotal for some people. So it's important to give them hope and opportunities. I think there's things organisations can do to help people who do have to leave well and still feel valued. So I know recently I've seen organisations like Monzo, Perkbox, Airbnb, they've had to make roles redundant, and they've let people go through as a result of redundancy. And those organisations will publish what they call talent directories. So they've captured the kind of names, the job titles, the skills of all the people that are leaving their organisations through redundancy, and they've published them on their websites, on social media, saying, look at these great people. Unfortunately, economic circumstances mean we can't have them working for us, but we want to recommend them to you. So that's a really lovely way of showing you value the staff, even if you can't keep them. If your organisation isn't up for doing something as kind of public as that, then you can refer people into your network. You can more privately talk to your network of suppliers and contacts and see if they've got any roles that might be available for individuals. So I think the other thing you can do is maybe collate and highlight achievements and significant contributions people have made while they've been with you. So, Joanna, you were talking kind of about people doing that for themselves. But if, as you're leaving your organisation gives you a document that kind of captures everything that's brilliant that you've delivered while you've been there, I think that would be a great thing to do. I think you can offer to give people that are leaving your organisation first refusals on new vacancies if they do come up in the future, if the kind of business environment changes. You can create an alumni group and keep people who are leaving you kind of engaged so they know what's going on with the organisation. And I think also it's important to allow people the chance to say goodbye and send farewell messages to colleagues that they might have had, long relationships with. So I think kind of saying goodbye is really important. So you've already done some great work on kind of talking about the kind of support. So the more employers and managers and HR people can signpost individuals in the redundancy process to opportunities for support, then that's brilliant. So it's practical support, it's emotional support, it's signposting to financial advice and how to access benefits, It's very likely that some people in your organisation won't have ever had to engage with the kind of that system, and maybe facing doing that for the first time. If you can offer out placement support, so help with CV writing and job interview skills and that sort of thing, that's brilliant. But a lot of organisations, if they're in a position where they're making people redundant, might not have the luxury of the budget to do that, but there's still a lot that you can do that's kind of free, and can still provide people support. So employee assistance programs are a great way of doing that, and a lot of them will let your employees carry on accessing the services even if they're no longer an employee. So you might find that for 3 months or 6 months after they've left, you can still, as an individual, carry on accessing the services of the employee assistance program. I think peer support's a really good thing as well. Can you create an online space for everybody in your at-risk pool to share kind of job vacancies they come up with, or share advice, or kind of do some CV reviewing, or you know, you can do that as an organisation. And you talked about building your contacts up. So LinkedIn's a really great forum for connecting, and there are so many people on LinkedIn who are so willing to reach out and help individuals, particularly at the moment. So don't be afraid to do that. And there's a fantastic group on there called Furlearn, F-U-R Learn, and that was set up at the start of furlough to bring together people who've been furloughed and give them a bit of a sense of community. And that's still running now, and they're helping people on furlough, but also people who've lost their roles and lost their jobs. And they have a regular kind of series of online events about job hunting, about mental health, and fun stuff. So there's lots of communities out there, and kind of webinars like this are brilliant. So I think really make use of those kind of external online communities. And then just want to say a bit about supporting managers, leaders, and the HR team. It's tough to manage a redundancy process. Tougher to go through it, but it's also really tough from a manager and HR perspective to deliver news. So if you support your managers and leaders and HR teams well, then they're more likely to be able to support the people that they're working with in the redundancy consultation, and kind of reflect that kind of human approach if you treat them in a really human way. So I think it's about preparing them to deliver kind of key messages, make sure they're prepped to answer questions, make sure they know where to signpost people to. So as a manager, if they're having a redundancy consultation conversation with 10 people, they're not trying to carry the burden of supporting those 10 people on their own, but they know where to signpost those individuals to for additional support. And I think when you're a manager or an HR professional or a leader, it's natural to want to distance yourself a bit from the bad news that you're having to give to people, and that can come across as a bit cold. You can appear a bit withdrawn. If you hide behind the legal process. So I think it's about supporting your managers and preparing them if they're having those redundancy consultations. Prepare them for the fact they're likely to encounter a range of emotions. Somebody might be angry, somebody else might be super quiet. And I think the other thing for me, lesson I've learned is not over scripting. So when you're trying to support managers through the process, it can be quite tempting to give them a really documented script of what they should say. But there's a risk that if you've done too good a job, they just read it. And that doesn't feel like a conversation to the person on the other side. So I think it's about giving managers kind of the guidelines, but not over scripting. And I think the last group of people is about looking after the team left behind. So it's not a lovely experience for the individuals who aren't at risk of redundancy to see their colleagues and friends go through a redundancy process. And they'll also have their own concerns about what does this mean for the organisation in the future and going forward. So for the team that are going to remain after the redundancy process has ended, I think it's about giving them vision and a hope for the future. Keep up with the regular one-to-ones throughout the redundancy consultation process to check in with them, seeing how they're doing. And they'll be affected equally by how they see their colleagues being treated in the redundancy process. So if they see their colleagues being treated badly, then that's going to reflect on how they feel about the organisation and their roles. If they see their colleagues being treated respectfully and in a really human way, then again, that will reflect on how they feel. So I think that was my last point.
Great, thank you, Danielle. We Yeah, this was very interesting and very helpful. I believe our audience could really take something from this. And if there are any questions now, you have time to ask them in the chat function or raise your hand, then I will unmute you. But yeah, for those who leave us now, thank you very much for joining us today. Stay safe and have a nice rest of your afternoon. No questions so far? We will wait a few minutes to see. Thank you, Kimi. Right, if we don't have any more questions, feel free to always send us an email, or if anything comes later, yeah, just let us know. And one comment here, very useful, especially the point about creating an alumni and saying goodbye. I think, yeah, Danielle, this was very very good and very helpful for people to know.
Yeah. And I'm happy for people to contact me through LinkedIn if they want to take the conversations further.
Great, thanks. All right, then I wish you all a lovely afternoon. Take care and hopefully see you to our next webinars. Thank you, Danielle. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.